Hello there guys, and welcome to Mad.Minis. In this video I'm going to build a modular Space Hulk system based on these children's magnetic toys. So these are called Mag Genius. There are several different manufacturers out there. I got on really well with these ones and I bought myself a big jumbo pack of them for about 70 quid. But in that I got 180 odd pieces. So these square tiles are going to be the most important ones by far to form the walls and some of the floors of the Space Hulk. You'll see where I'm coming from in a minute. But they're nice. They've got a little bit of thickness to them, but they're not too thick, so they look plausible as walls. And we've got loads of different shapes in there. Some of them are more useful than others. So we've got these shapes, which are the same size as those squares. All the squares are 3 inches square. So they're nice kind of, you know, a nice modular size that will kind of scale up to a 2-foot board perfectly. So those window pieces and these kind of square pieces here with the inset bit, they might be good as kind of flooring tiles. So I can put grating over those or windows, and there's lots of possibilities here. But all the square pieces, as I said, 3 inches by 3 inches. So here we've got fantastic doorways. So that, you know, that kind of that's tailor-made for it. And moving on, we've got these unusual pieces. I'm probably going to use these ones as floor tiles because they won't have much use on the walls. So I can cover them with grating and just use them as floors. These I didn't find too much use for in the end, but you'll see that you can actually make some interesting shapes out of some of this stuff. These big squares are 6 inch square, and they're of course fantastic for making rooms within the Space Hulk. We've got these smaller wall sections. I didn't really find a good use for these, but you know, they're in there. You've got a few of those as well. You can see here that it's like 3 inches by maybe 1.5 inch, something like that. It's about half the square. All right. We've also got a selection of triangles. These ones here I didn't actually paint up and use in the end, but they can be quite useful as like a kind of supports on the side where there's any kind of weakness. So here I'm just doing a little bit of a mock-up to show you how modular these things are. They stick together really well, but they come apart quite easily. They're designed for gentle play with children, so they don't just fall apart, but you have got to be a bit thoughtful of how you put them together. So, you know, if you put a long wall together, like I'm doing here, look, it's really quite weak. It'll just like fall over, all right? There's not really much there holding it. If you put braces in here and there, so if you put corner pieces in and braces across the hallway, then it becomes really quite strong and robust. You know, and it takes some doing to kind of knock it over accidentally. Do you know what I mean? You know, you can take it apart easily enough, but it doesn't come together accidentally very easily, if that makes sense. So there we are. We've got a doorway piece in the middle there, and that's providing some real extra structural integrity to that whole thing. And I guess that's how magnets work, right? They need to kind of pulling in different directions, and that's how you get the support going. So here I'm just showing you that you can, you know, create hallways going off in different directions. Now, I will as well acknowledge the chap who I got this idea from. Now, I'm sure there's been probably a few model makers out there who had this idea. This isn't my idea, guys. I need to stress that. This is something that I saw in another video, and I will pay tribute to him at the end. All right. Now, you can see here, very modular, very useful stuff. You can see where I'm going with this. Now, what I'm going to use this for is my big battle board build of the Frigate Warspite, because I want to cover one of my 2-foot by 2-foot boards with kind of hallways and rooms to make the board more interesting. Now, none of this is going to be stuck down. You can see here, look, that when you attach the tiles, there is some overhang. And that's important. You know, just remember that they don't sit flush on top. They kind of hold onto the corner there. Do you see that? All right, so that's really important when you're doing your building and you're working out dimensions. Just remember that's how it all works. Here I'm demonstrating a room, okay? So with one of those larger 6 by 6 inch tiles, and that's definitely where they come in handy because it gives you some bigger floor space. It should be noted there's no magnets in the middle of that big square, so you can't start to build kind of complex rooms on those. There are big 12-inch tiles available that do have magnets throughout them, but I think they've got limited use, quite frankly, because I'm going to cover all my flooring tiles in grating, and I think that might affect the magnetic qualities if you were to kind of try and put stuff over the top of it. Hopefully you'll see what I mean later on in the video. But yeah, lots of possibilities here. Really, really excited for this. So let's Let's just go to these corner pieces. Now you can see here you can actually build a 6-inch kind of square out of those corner pieces and put another square in the middle, and you get something exactly the same size. So there is a good deal of modularity to this stuff. And here I'm just showing that you can actually put one of these triangles in the corner as a brace, and that will greatly strengthen things if you need it. You can also create some quite funky dimensions and angles with the triangles in the kit. Look on the floor here. There's lots of possibilities. I'm going to keep mine quite well, traditional, let's say. It's going to be all kind of squared off and everything, but I just wanted to show you there's lots of possibilities with these triangles. I mean, you can create some fantastic angles. Some of them don't work out quite as well as you'd like. So for instance here, look, we've got this kind of nice fan shape, and you can kind of put walls around the outside of it, which work really, really well, but it doesn't exactly square off with one of those nice big floor plates. And you'll see what I mean. We'll attach one of those 6x6 floor tiles, the big kind of floor tiles, and you can see that it doesn't quite square off, so it's not perfect. So just be aware that there are some discrepancies with this stuff. All right, at least there is with this kind of Mag Genius one that I got. So here I'm going to start to create some floor tiles. So I'm using some granny grating, which is my go-to. You could also use that kind of drywall tape if you wanted to as well. But I really, really love this stuff. It's nice and thick. It looks realistic to me. And I'm just going to measure that out. And I worked out that it's kind of 17 cells up and down in a square. And I just kind of mass produce those and stick those onto the tiles with super glue. My advice here with the super glue is to seal it around the edges so that it doesn't come off. You know, stitching mess is great, but it doesn't necessarily stick down too well to other plastic surfaces. Here I'm just doing some testing. This is really important. Test, test, test. Because the way these things go together isn't immediately obvious, and you need to make sure that by putting your mesh down on your flooring, it's not going to interfere with you connecting the bits together, so you're not going to destroy the modularity that you're going for. So always do a little bit of a test, and you can see that I've left a little bit of a kind of a gap, if you will, around the edges where I put that mesh on, so I can put kind of cross braces and walls on nice and easily. But always do little tests here and there, guys. Whatever kind of manufacturer you get yours from, you have to play around with the kit first to understand its limitations and its abilities, you know. So here I'm just dabbing on super glue onto one of those floor tiles, and on it goes. You could weigh this down if you wanted to, but my big advice is to seal it around the edges. I start going into mass production. Then I start thinking about making some nice kind of wall tiles here. So I mess around with various different things. We've got some ruminate and some self-adhesive pearls going on here. We've got these cable tie holder things that I've used on other builds. They're like a nice kind of detail, and they're self-adhesive, so they just stick right in the middle. Easy peasy. And then I also throw on some of those self-adhesive pearl things again to act like big rivets. I went through lots of different iterations, lots of different things. A lot of them didn't make it into the final build. But, you know, that's the whole process. You've got to play around with it and experiment. You really have. So here I'm using some Lego pieces to kind of act as kind of like vents. All right. Easy peasy. Here I'm using a kind of piece of a plastic toy. I don't know exactly what that is. Glue that on and then put a kind of small grade bit of stitching mesh in the middle to act like a kind of vent. That's a nice little one, and these ones made it to the final cut. You can see here there are some variations that didn't make it into the final build, and that's because I wasn't satisfied with the way they looked and the way they came together. It was starting to look a little bit like Toy Town, especially with all the different colours. So some things didn't make it into the final build, guys. If you're seeing things you don't see later on, that's why. This was experimentation kind of phase right now, all right? And do make sure you do that yourself. Play around with it first. Don't just leap into it. All right. So moving on, I just want to demonstrate that you can kind of do these kind of hexagonal rooms as well if you wish. So you can go for, you know, some nice kind of different shapes and things. And this isn't really going to work on my battle board, but if you were doing like a standalone Space Hulk kind of thing, you could easily make a kind of nice shape room like this. And, you know, it's just a nice little feature. So very easily done with using the triangles. So I'm going to get down to kind of painting some of these floor tiles now. Sprayed them in black. Gloss, unfortunately, I had to go over those again, but that's another story. We just put lead belcher over the top of that with an overbrush. Not so much a dry brush, but definitely an overbrush. And that creates a nice kind of stark kind of pattern on the floors, which is what we want. And obviously I do that across all the different floor tiles I produce so far, the big ones and the small ones. And you can see here a cup of tea is delivered by my faithful wife. You need to keep drinking tea and coffee, guys. It's so important on these builds. Refuel all the time. Take a nice slurp of tea or coffee, your preferred beverage, and crack on. There you go. Lovely. So we're starting to kind of get this kind of mass production thing in place now. There was a lot of tiles to go through, a lot of numbers to crank out. So I needed to get my recipes down properly. The floor tiles were quite easy, but I needed to solidify what I was going to do with a lot of these wall tiles. So we've got some logos from the toy manufacturer on there that I kind of want to cover up. So what I end up doing there is actually just using some cereal box cardstock. And now these are 2 1/4 inch squared, all right, and that will leave a nice gap around the outside of the tile so that it can connect properly to the other tiles. Very important. So I made a master copy there and just cut around that hundreds of times basically, and I used quite a lot of cereal packets for that, and I just super glued those down in the center. Okay, make sure you put the super glue all around the edge of the cardboard. Put the nice smooth side up and put the fibrous side down. Go all around the edge, otherwise they tend to kind of bump up in the middle and peel up. So do a nice seal all the way around, guys, okay? And I did that on both sides of all the floor, or the wall tiles rather, sorry. Now I'm adding some little details. We've got a multi-laser power pack from an old Sentinel there. Nice little detail. Then we've got the flamer kind of canisters from an old Sentinel as well. The old Sentinel kit's getting chopped up here. So I duplicated some of these. I used the Lego vents like I did earlier on, just a little bit more refined, just using a couple of those stuck together. You can see I'm putting them in the lower corner, and some of these things can be placed in different positions. Some of them need to be placed one way up. Here I've got, I've got here like a fire extinguisher and like a little box from the Sentinel kit, the old Sentinel kit. I'm just making like a little, I don't know, emergency kind of station with a fire extinguisher and a first aid kit or something. Stupid in 40k, I know, but I couldn't resist myself. So here we are, look. So as I said, some of those will be duplicated. I'm also making these kind of big pipes to go on the wall. Now, I'm using these parts from a World War I tank kit that I had left over. They're like kind of half a cylinder kind of things. I just put them on the wall and then attach a little bit of Lego piping between them. I do duplicate this. I do a couple of these. And it's just nice for the pipes to be going somewhere, because remember it's modular, so you need to kind of bring an end to whatever you're doing on each tile. So pipes can't just be going off in a random direction, because if they're not going to connect up with anything, it's not going to look very good. Here I made some more floor tiles using the kind of window pieces. So, you know, I wasn't going to use those anywhere else. And here I'm making some more doorways because I didn't really have enough. So I'm using these window pieces and cutting out the middle strut with a hobby saw. And that produces some extra needed kind of bulkheads and door tiles, because as I said, I didn't have quite enough of those nice arched ones, and these kind of cut out enough with like a minimal presence around the edge, so it didn't look too bulky for models to get over. Do you know what I mean? So that was fine. That created a few more needed doors. Going into mass production, more and more floor tiles here, painted and prepared. Here, I'm just weathering some of these wall tiles. So I just use some lead belcher and stipple that on in different places. I don't want this to be a really run-down Space Hulk, but more of like a used, worn, functional kind of ship. That's what I'm going for. You could distress these a hell of a lot more than what I'm doing, guys. But this is just what I did, because it's just the aesthetic that matches my big battle board. Okay, so once again, mass production. Oh, there was a lot to do here, but it was worth it in the end. Okay, we actually did a little bit of a mock-up at this stage to see how many more tiles I would need, and you can see here I ran a little bit short, so I knew I needed to add some more. And it's always good to overshoot what you think you'll need as well, so you can do a different kind of mock-ups and versions within the space you want to use, you know what I mean? So just make sure you've got plenty going there. Painting some of the smaller details here, so using some nice deep kind of coppery bronze colours on there just for a bit of contrast. And you can see here, look, some kind of blues and reds and yellows just to make things pop a little bit, add a little bit of interest. Using some little printed out signs, these are just printed out on the computer. They add some nice little bit of character and bring everything back to scale. And all this is going to get knocked back with some washes in a minute. So it looks quite stark at the moment, but actually that's going to get dulled down. We're going to use null oil to do that. You might want to make your own kind of wash here, because obviously you're going to go through quite a bit of it. I really love null oil. I've got lots of it, so I decided to use that. And then I kind of stipple it off with a paper towel, and that produces a really nice effect. It just looks weathered and not streaky. I didn't want to do streaks because that would dictate what way around you have to put the wall tiles up. If it's stippling, kind of works a bit better. I actually covered over some of the logos on the kind of doorways here, the toy logos, just with little bits of cardstock, which got painted later on. Here I'm doing my first proper mock-up, and just be a bit mindful of how you put it together. It takes a little bit of attention to detail, but actually it went together reasonably quickly. There's lots of ways you can put it together, and it's not going to be perfect, guys, but you get the modularity, and I think it actually ends up looking pretty damn good. So now's a good time to mention that if you've enjoyed the content, please like the video, guys. It really does help, and consider sharing with a friend if you think they'd be interested. Also, if you're not already subscribed, consider giving us a sub. Thanks ever so much for watching, guys, and I want to add a special thanks to Mr. Mark Dickey, who made the video that inspired mine. Thanks ever so much, Mark, and go check out his original video. I'll put a link in the descriptions. Cheers.